Back in 2017, I moved to a shrinking town in rural Illinois where the population was mostly retired, mostly quiet, and mostly watching from behind curtain edges. I was 22. I knew exactly one person. Her name was Clara, and she introduced me to a couple she'd seen at the local diner. Early 50s, friendly enough, looking for someone to watch their dogs. She thought it would be good for me. She thought it was safe. She was wrong. The first time I visited their house, I noticed the cameras before I noticed the dogs. They were everywhere, mounted outside along the roofline, angled at the driveway, pointed at the fence. Inside, they watched the hallways, the kitchen, the office, the garage. A monitor in the back room displayed all the feeds in a grid like a control center. The couple mentioned it was for insurance purposes. They sold firearms out of the house as a side business, which explained it, technically. But when they gave me the tour, they didn't say much. They'd just open a door and stand there while I looked inside. Then close it. Then open the next one. Their eyes never met mine. They were always somewhere else on my body, slowly scanning. I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was just desperate for human connection in a town where I didn't belong. The first night I stayed, I was alone with the dogs and a grid of camera feeds and nothing else. The second night, one of the cameras went dark. The one pointed at the driveway, just offline, black square in the corner of the screen. The Wi-Fi out there was terrible, so I didn't panic. I told myself it was the signal. I got up to check the door anyway, just in case the camera had fallen from its mount. That's when the dogs launched off the floor like they'd been electrocuted. They scrambled so fast their paws scrabbled against the hardwood, claws screeching, and they hurled themselves through the doggy door into the backyard before I could even turn around. I heard them a second later, barking at something along the back fence, the fence that opened to the woods. I didn't see anything in the dark beyond the yard. No shape, no movement, no sound except dogs absolutely losing their minds at one specific point on that fence. It took me 20 minutes and half a bag of treats to coax them back inside. I dragged a heavy wooden chair and wedged it flush against the doggy door. I took a photo of it with my phone. Then I went to bed and didn't sleep. The next morning, I woke up and the chair was in the corner of the room. Not nudged, not shifted. Moved. Relocated nearly 6 feet across the room, sitting with its legs flat like someone had set it down neatly. The dogs were outside in the yard, happily doing their business. I called Clara. My voice was doing something wrong when I talked. She came over and we searched every room, every closet, every shadow. Nothing. She offered me the most reasonable explanation available, that I hadn't pushed the chair as firmly as I remembered. And I accepted it because I didn't want to think about the alternative. I pushed through the next 4 days on the kind of alertness that makes your jaw ache. But the house stayed quiet, and I started to breathe again. Then all 4 cameras went offline simultaneously. Not 1, not 2. All 4 feeds, black squares across the entire grid at the same time. I texted the couple in Florida to let them know. Not to alarm them, just a heads up. Do you want me to troubleshoot? Hours passed. Nothing. It was close to midnight when I settled into bed. The dogs on the couch nearby, a kitchen knife on the nightstand because I wasn't pretending anymore. The silence in that house had texture. It pressed. Then the dogs launched again. Same explosion off the floor, same frantic scramble, same frenzied barking from the back fence, aimed at the same spot in the dark. I got up with the knife and stood at the back door and looked out into the yard, and I couldn't see a damn thing except 2 dogs losing their minds at whatever was on the other side of that fence. Then, from the other end of the house, a thump. I didn't move. I stood there calculating, the dogs or the noise or the dogs. I got the dogs in, pressed the chair back against the doggy door, took another photo, and made myself walk toward the back room, where the sound had come from. I don't know how else to say this except that some rooms feel different when someone is already in them. There's a quality to the air, a density, a hum beneath the silence that isn't silence at all. I stopped in the hallway outside the door and said loudly, "Who's there? What are you doing here?" Nothing. I called the names of the couple, on the wild chance they'd come home without telling me. Nothing. I backed away, quietly. I pulled the door shut and locked it from the hallway side and retreated to the living room, knife in one hand, phone in the other, unable to make myself do anything for 20 minutes while the house breathed around me. Then my phone lit up, a text from the wife. It was almost 2 a.m. in Florida. "Hi, don't worry about the cameras, you're safe." I read it 3 times. I hadn't said anything about feeling unsafe. I had texted them about a technical issue, but she answered a question I hadn't asked. Before I could respond, another message arrived. "Also, can you make sure I didn't leave the garage door open to the inside? I don't want anything getting in. The door she meant was inside that room. The locked room. The room I just backed away from. I didn't answer. I sat there and pretended I was asleep. 2 minutes later, "Hi, I know it's late, but can you please check on this for me as I'm worried?" I still didn't move. Then, "I see you're up. Can you please go in and check?" My blood went cold. She could see me on the hallway camera. She was watching me right now, in real time, in the dark, from Florida. She knew exactly where I was standing, and she was asking me specifically, urgently, repeatedly, to open that door. I don't know why I did it. Fear of seeming hysterical, fear of being wrong, some deep and stupid human need to not be the crazy person. I unlocked the door and pushed it open from as far away as I could, arms stretched, head turned, expecting... I don't know what I was expecting. The room looked empty. I walked in. The garage door connecting to the room was open, and beyond it was pure darkness. I pulled out my phone to use as a flashlight, and a notification lit the screen for half a second, and in that faint glow I saw it, an arm, pressed flat against the wall beside the garage doorway. 2 feet from where I was standing, I ran. I don't remember deciding to run. I was just running through the door, across the kitchen, keys off the counter, out the front door into the night, fumbling with shaking hands at my car door. I got it open. I started the engine. My headlights flooded the front of the house and caught the garage door, already halfway up, rising on its own, and in the far corner behind a box, squatting with his knees to his chest, was a grown man in a dark jacket. I put the car in reverse and I didn't stop until I reached the police station. The officer who went back to the house found the garage door open. No signs of forced entry, no one inside. He swept the perimeter. Nothing. He was kind enough to follow me back and sweep the house again with me there. He left around 3 a.m. 20 minutes later, the wife texted, "Hi, plans changed. We'll be home soon. You can go home now." No acknowledgement of what I just described to her in frantic texts. No apology, no explanation, just go home, as if she'd been waiting for the all clear. I grabbed my things and drove. Halfway down the rural road toward the main street, I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a car, no headlights, pull silently into their driveway. I texted her, "Someone just pulled into your driveway as I was leaving." Her response came before I reached the stop sign. I know. They had never gone to Florida, or they'd come back early and stayed close, driving slow loops on the path behind the house while the dogs barked at the dark. They'd killed the cameras so I couldn't watch them watching me. And they sent me into that garage room at 1 a.m., again and again until I went, because someone was waiting on the other side of that door. I never heard from them again. Clara never saw them at the diner again. I am 30 years old. I still can't fully sleep in unfamiliar houses. I keep lights on in hallways. I cannot be in a room without knowing where the exits are. I was within arm's reach of a man hiding in the dark, and I will never stop being able to feel exactly how close that was. Story 2. The elderly couple at the bar. I work as a bartender outside Baltimore at one of those high-volume, no-waiter spots where the chaos never fully stops. Fridays are controlled disasters. That particular night was a college crowd, loud, young, ordering rounds of tequila faster than physics allows. I loved it. I thrive in that kind of noise. I am always watching the room, which is why what happened made me feel like I was losing my mind. I noticed them when they came in. Elderly couple, maybe mid-70s, moving through a crowd of 23-year-olds toward the booth in the far corner. I clocked them as curious. What are they doing here? And then I got pulled back into the weeds of a packed bar and forgot about them entirely. About 40 minutes later, my hands were on autopilot, pouring gin and tonics down the line, when something made the back of my neck prickle. I looked up. They were still there. Hadn't moved. And they hadn't ordered anything. I would have remembered them at the bar. But the thing that hit me, the thing that made my hands slow on the bottles, was that they weren't looking at each other. They were both turned toward the wall beside them, perfectly still, staring at nothing. Their mouths weren't moving. They weren't touching. They sat with the absolute stillness of people who had stopped waiting for something and were simply present, occupying space, watching a wall. During my first break, I walked over. Neither of them turned as I approached. I cleared my throat and asked if they'd like anything. The woman didn't react, not a flinch, not a blink. The man turned his head toward me with a slowness that felt mechanical, like watching a dial turn. When his face came into view, I felt something fundamental drop out of my stomach. The skin hung loose and the color had left it. His eyes were sunk deep in their sockets, dark-ringed, ancient, in a way that felt less like age and more like something that had been underground a long time. He looked at me, through me, and shook his head, once. deliberate, silent. I went back to the bar. I did not look at that booth for a long time. When I finally glanced over again, both of them were staring directly at me, not at the room, not at the crowd, at me specifically across the full length of the bar. The woman held my gaze and did not look away. I looked away first. When I looked back a moment later, they were both still doing it, heads turned at exactly the same angle, like they'd been placed. I looked away again. When I turned back the third time, the booth was empty. Not vacated, empty. No glasses on the table, no jackets on the seat, no evidence that two people had sat there for over an hour. Just a clean booth and a loud bar. At closing, I asked my coworker Karen about them. Karen has worked there for years and has a perfect memory for faces. She is the kind of person who can recall what a Tuesday night regular ordered 14 months ago. I described the couple. Elderly, booth in the corner, didn't order, sat completely still for an hour. She looked at me with genuine confusion. She hadn't seen them. I pushed. She crossed her arms and recited, from memory, at least 10 different people who had come through that night, what they ordered, what they wore. She hadn't missed anyone. She just hadn't seen them. I walked my car alone. The parking lot was quiet and orange lit. As I crossed toward my car, I glanced across the street and stopped walking. Two figures stood under a streetlight. They weren't moving. They were facing my direction. Even at that distance, even in that orange glow, I knew exactly who they were. The same stillness, the same wrongness. They just stood there in the middle of the night, across the street from a bar they had apparently never been seen inside of. I didn't scream. The sound just didn't come. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove home repeating sounds under my breath that weren't quite words. I've never seen them again. Karen still doesn't know what I'm talking about. I have no explanation to offer. I only know what I saw, and I know she didn't. And I know they were across that street waiting for me to come out. Story 3, The Logger's Mountain. This is a story my best friend told me many times about his father. I pass it on because I think about it constantly. His dad was a tree saw operator in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. He was the type of man who measured his self-worth in hours worked. 16, 18, 20 hours a day in the deep woods, paid by volume, always pushing for one more tree. He worked with a partner named Griffin, and together they ran a remote job site so far up a mountain that the company spent 3 weeks just clearing a road to reach it. 10 days into the job, the radios started picking up other voices. Not static, not interference, voices, conversations in fragments, muffled at first, then clearer as the days passed, following them across channels in a way that should have been impossible. Anyone who's used a field radio understands this. You change channels to escape crosstalk. You don't get followed. But these voices followed. And the tone of them, his dad said this specifically, felt wrong. Casual in a way that didn't fit a place no one was supposed to be. They started finding evidence, containers, footprints, small camps scattered through areas that weren't on any trail. Then Griffin found the tent. Inside, a sleeping bag, a duffel bag, children's underwear, multiple pairs, duct tape, rope, hand-drawn sketches that I will not describe except to say they depicted the abuse of children. And a fresh apple. Whoever owned that tent had been there recently. Griffin wanted to leave. His dad said finish the job. They compromised, radio silence unless it was an emergency, heads down, work fast. That night in the camper, the radio crackled on again, and this time they heard two men speaking clearly, collecting water, gathering wood, planning a fire. His dad lay in his sleeping bag listening to two predators make camp a few hundred yards away in the dark. He grabbed the radio and told them he knew they were there, demanded to know who they were. The channel went silent immediately. Not interrupted, cut. Like a switch. Griffin was furious. They'd just announced themselves to people who didn't want to be found. They argued. They agreed to go to the authorities in the morning. They went to sleep. Midnight. Griffin shook him awake, whispering. Footsteps on the gravel outside the camper, slow, deliberate. His dad reached for his gun, unloaded ammunition somewhere he couldn't remember, and both of them sat frozen in the dark as the door handle was tested from outside. The door eased open, didn't swing wide, just crept open an inch, then held. The camper was elevated, no ladder, no easy way up. Then the scratching started. Long, dragged scratches along the outside of the door like nails pulled slowly through wood. 4 minutes of it. Neither of them moved. Neither of them spoke. Then his dad decided he'd had enough. He got up. He moved toward the door. He reached for it just as it exploded inward and a knife caught him across the face. The pain blinded him. He fell out of the camper and hit the ground, and then a man was on top of him with a blade at his throat, and a second man was kicking him in the head. Griffin came out of nowhere, leapt from the camper and tackled the knife, and the men ran. Disappeared into the mountain dark. 2 hours to the nearest hospital. The cut across his eyes was severe enough to permanently damage his vision. His right pupil never fully recovered. They reported the attack and nothing came of it. 2 weeks later, one of their co-workers was found bound, gagged, raped, and murdered in a ditch near the job site. No arrests were ever made. I've been afraid of deep forests ever since I first heard this. Not because of animals, because of how completely you disappear into them. Because of how quietly someone can follow you through trees and you'd never hear them over your own machinery. Because of a fresh apple sitting in a tent in a place no one was supposed to be, and the silence on the radio after someone spoke into it, and the scratching on a door in the middle of a mountain night. Story 4. SOS on the Lake. Last summer. I was 20. My name is Kevin. My friend James has the kind of family wealth that owns vacation properties on private lakes. His parents are never around. That particular night it was just the two of us on the dock. I just ended a 3-year relationship and needed to be somewhere quiet. We were working through a case of beer when the light started flickering from the far shore. At first I thought it was a reflection, a trick of the dying sun on a window across the water. But it kept going after the sun was down. On and off, rhythmic and deliberate. 3 short pulses, 3 long, 3 short. James went pale when he recognized it. SOS. We watched it for a full minute. It cut off cleanly, mid-pattern. James wanted to call the police. I explained the problem. We were underage, we'd been drinking. I was already managing a DUI charge. Calling the cops was a door I couldn't open. We sat there in the dark watching the other shore and working through it like 2 people trying to find the responsible option that happened to also be slightly insane. We took James's dad's kayak. The lake felt different from the middle of it. The sounds from the shore fell away. The dark got heavier. Neither of us said anything after the first few hundred yards, and I think we both knew then that we'd made a stupid decision, but neither of us could be the one to turn back. The house came into view as we got close. Big, like all the houses on that lake, but neglected. The dock had half collapsed into the water, just rotted pilings and broken planks tilting sideways. We beached the kayak on the rocky yard instead, careful on the slippery stones, and looked up toward the second floor where the light had been. No light now, just a dark house and the trees behind it and the sound of water. We found an unlocked window on the ground level and climbed inside. The house was stripped to the walls, no furniture, no debris. Not abandoned, something more deliberate than abandoned. Emptied. Like a stage that had been cleared between performances. Our footsteps echoed on bare floors in a way that felt too loud. We found the stairs and went up. Found the hallway, found the room. In the center of it, facing the window, an old projector, angled outward, pointed at the glass, the kind that would have thrown light in a repeating pattern. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Not a distress signal, a lure. James was already running before the word trap finished forming in my mind. I heard a closet door crash open behind me as I turned. Heavy footsteps on the floor where I'd just been standing. I made it into the hallway and down the stairs and through the house and out the window, and I was sprinting toward the water when I heard James swear. The kayak was gone. I turned. From the side of the house someone was coming, running and running fast. I pulled my switchblade. James didn't. James jumped straight into the lake. I followed. The water was hypothermic. Every breath was a fight. My arms burned within the first 20 seconds and kept burning for the entire crossing. James's house on the far shore, looking impossibly far. A light in the distance that we swam toward on pure adrenaline and the specific terror that comes from not knowing how close someone is in the dark behind you. We made it. We dragged ourselves onto the dock and ran inside and locked everything. The police took an hour to arrive. They went across the lake and came back with nothing. Empty house, no footprints, no projector, no sign of anyone. The officer asked us why we hadn't just called them. I didn't have a good answer. I still don't know what someone wanted badly enough to set that up. The SOS on the dark water, the hollow house, the projector aimed at the window like a mouth. Whatever they planned for 2 20-year-olds who couldn't call the cops, I think about it whenever I'm near open water at night. Story 5, The Whistler in the Crawl Space. My name is Evan. I'm 28. After my divorce, I had nowhere else to go except my grandfather's old house, 10 acres in Alabama, 10 minutes outside a town called Chatham. surrounded on every side by trees. He left it to us when he died. It had been sitting empty. The first week was quiet, beer on the porch, owls, wind. On the 7th night, I heard whistling. It came from the woods behind the house, a slow, broken tune that didn't resolve into any song I recognized. Off-key, meandering. I told myself it was a drunk neighbor or a hunter out late. I went back to sleep. The next night, same tune, closer. I went outside with a flashlight. Nothing. No footprints, no retreating sounds, just the echo of it fading back into the trees like it had never been there. It happened again and again, always between 1:15 and 1:19 in the morning, with a consistency that felt less like coincidence and more like scheduling. I called the sheriff's department. A deputy I'll call Deputy H drove out, a man who had clearly spent decades learning to listen carefully before he spoke. When I described the whistling, he went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with thinking. He said, "Your granddaddy used to call us about the same thing, every spring for years. We never found anything. I thought he was just getting old." My grandfather, the man who'd lived alone in this house after my grandmother died, he'd heard it too. I found his journals in the attic a few days later. He'd been logging it for over a decade. Same time, same season. "Someone watching the house," he wrote. "He used to sit by the front door with a rifle across his knees. He never caught anyone. He never stopped hearing it." The nights that followed moved in one direction, closer. The whistling reached the shed, then the porch, then the porch steps. I lay in bed one night listening to 3 long, slow whistles from the other side of the front door, and then silence, and then nothing until morning. The night it came from inside. I was already on the couch with a shotgun I barely knew how to load. I heard it in the hallway, moving, step by step, the tune drifting toward me in the dark like something taking its time because it had nowhere else to be. I stood up, aimed at the dark, and shouted. It stopped. The hallway was empty. 2 nights of silence. I thought it was over. The 3rd night, knocking. 3 slow knocks from inside the back door. Then footsteps in the hallway. Then the hallway light went out. At the end of the hall, standing perfectly still, a person. Pale face, dark clothes, watching me with a stillness that didn't belong to something alive. I raised the gun. My hands were shaking badly enough that I was genuinely afraid I'd miss. I screamed at them not to move. They moved. They lifted 1 foot slowly, began to turn, and I screamed stop, and they bolted. Heavy footsteps exploding through the house, out the front door, into the night. I fired once into the dark. I screamed until my voice gave out. I drove into town and slept in my truck. Deputy H came back the next morning. The front door was unlocked. He walked through the house slowly and didn't say much. Then he told me, off the record, to leave. He said someone in those woods had been watching that house for decades and hadn't taken kindly to anyone living in it alone. We changed the locks that day. I drove to my parents' house that same night. My father sold the property later. He didn't mention to the buyers what had been living at the edge of the tree line every spring for as long as my grandfather could remember. Whoever had a key to that house, I don't know how they got it. I don't know why they chose us. I don't know if they ever stopped showing up when the weather turned. What I know is that whatever my grandfather heard on those cold spring nights, alone in that house after my grandmother died, sitting by the door with a rifle in his lap, he heard it every year until he died. And no one ever believed him until it happened to me. The projector next door. My name is Evan. I'm 28. After my divorce, I moved to a quiet suburb, good neighborhood, mostly families, houses spaced generously apart. The one exception was the house next door. It was enormous. No family that size lived there, just a guy named Damon. Young, mid-20s, a mullet and a smile that appeared a half-second too fast. He said he was in finance. He didn't elaborate. When I asked if he wanted to grab a drink, he looked over his shoulder into his own living room before answering. I work from home. My office is on the 3rd floor and overlooks Damon's property. I tell you this so you understand I wasn't being obsessive. His house was just there, in my peripheral vision, all day, every day. And over 6 months, I never once saw him leave. His car sat in the driveway. No deliveries, no visitors, no lights moving through the house at irregular hours. He lived there like a kept secret. Then one Wednesday night at 2 a.m., 7 cars appeared in his driveway and the music started. Not loud music, devastating music, the kind that would wake children 3 houses over. I pulled on a hoodie and walked to his door. No answer. I knocked harder. Nothing. I tried the handle. The door opened. Inside the foyer, a pile of shoes, at least 10 pairs carefully arranged, but the house beyond them was empty. Not just quiet, vacated, no cups on the table, no coats on the chairs. And then I really listened to the music, and something behind my sternum went cold. It wasn't music. It was a recording. People laughing, glasses clinking, voices layering over each other in a simulation of a party. A track designed to sound like a crowded room. The shoes were real, the cars were real, but there was no party. I moved through the house slowly, found a door slightly ajar, a staircase going down into a basement lit by a thin strip of light from somewhere deeper. I should have left. I went down. The sound at the bottom of the stairs was mechanical, a rhythmic grinding like heavy equipment. I moved toward it, toward a door with a crack of light beneath it, and through the gap I saw 3 men, older than Damon significantly, wearing rubber gloves and heavy work clothes and protective goggles, standing in a row, looking at something outside my line of sight. And the smell hit me, bleach or something like it, chemical and thick. I don't know how to explain what happened in my body in that moment except to say that it was not a decision, it was biology. Some ancient part of my nervous system looked at those 3 men in rubber gloves in a basement and simply said, "You will die here." I turned to leave, and the light behind me dimmed, not switched off, dimmed, as if a door had been pulled shut. I ran. Up the stairs, through the house, out the front door, over my own fence, into my backyard through the side door, locked it. From my darkened office window, minutes later, I watched 8 men pour out of Damon's front door and scan the yard, the driveway, the street. 2 of them shoved each other. 1 of them pointed. They went back inside. The fake party recording stopped. Damon was not among them. Damon has not come back. His packages are stacked against the door. His grass is long and yellowing. None of my neighbors heard the music that night, which should have been impossible given how loud it was. The shoes in the foyer, the cars in the driveway. The recording of a party to cover the sound of machinery below. Men wearing gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints on the thing they were doing in the basement. And the front door left unlocked. I don't know if that was an accident. I don't know if someone was supposed to lock it and didn't, and if that's what the men were arguing about in the street. I don't know if the unlocked door was what I was meant to find, or if it was the other thing, the thing I felt when the light dimmed at the bottom of those stairs. If Damon comes back, I don't think I'll ask him anything. I think I'll move. Story 7. The figure at the end of the hall. My name is Jeremy. I drove up a mountain in December to visit an old friend named Scott, who I hadn't seen since high school. He'd reached out after years of silence. Said the snow made the place beautiful. Said I should come. Something was wrong with him from the moment I arrived. He moved slowly, spoke in incomplete sentences with long pauses between them, and kept looking down the hallway. A long, dark corridor that ended in a closed door and 2 open guest rooms that swallowed all the light. He'd explained the hallway, empty rooms, old grandparents' house. He lived there alone. He said it casually, but every hour or 2 he'd walk down that hallway and return without explanation. I never heard the bathroom flush. The first night I slept on the pull-out couch facing the hall. I left a light on at the entrance to it because the dark there was specific, the kind that feels populated. Upstairs at 2 a.m., running footsteps, fast, back and forth across the ceiling, 20 seconds, then silence. Nothing after that. The second night, scraping from the hallway, something dragging across wood. Then a single tap on the wall behind me, sharp as a finger flick, and then nothing. Old house, I told myself. Old house. The third night, I woke up and couldn't move. Sleep paralysis. I'd heard of it. I'd never felt it. The experience is being conscious inside a body that has been switched off, awake, aware, and utterly unable to do anything. My eyes were open, my body was stone, and at the end of the hallway in the dark something was standing. I couldn't see a face. The shape was man-shaped, arms at the sides, upright, still. Just existing in the dark at the end of that corridor, looking at the couch. At me. For a full minute, maybe longer, it didn't move. Then, with no rush whatsoever, it turned to the right and walked into the guest room and was gone. My body came back to me slowly, fingers first, then arms, then the ability to sit up. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I made myself walk down the hallway. I made myself look in the room. Someone was standing in the far corner facing the window. I backed away and ran upstairs. Scott was in his bed, asleep, completely still. I shook him awake and told him someone was in the house, and he looked at me. Not with fear, not with confusion, but with an expression I can only describe as recognition, like I was describing something he already knew the shape of. I asked him directly, "Scott, who is that downstairs?" He shrugged his shoulders. I was in my car inside of 10 minutes. As I backed out of the driveway, I looked up at the house one last time. In the window of the guest room at the end of the hall, the room where I'd seen the figure standing, a silhouette, watching me leave. Scott stopped responding to texts after that. When I threatened a wellness check, he replied, "I'm fine," 2 words, nothing else. He did not respond again. Whatever lives in that hallway in that house on that mountain, Scott knows what it is, and he invited me there anyway, and he wouldn't follow me down those stairs, and when I asked him who was in his home in the middle of the night, his face told me that he'd already accepted it a long time ago. I don't know what that means. I don't want to